The miniseries Chernobyl, which was created by Craig Mazin and came out in 2019, well exemplifies the dynamics of heavy state surveillance, the likes of which was carried out throughout most of the 20th century in many parts of the world. That is, the miniseries can help us understand both what heavy state surveillance looks like and, more importantly, what the effects of heavy state surveillance are. As such, it gives us a glimpse into a widespread phenomenon which is rarely portrayed in a credible and engaging way in films and on television. The Chernobyl miniseries tells the story of the unprecedented nuclear accident that took place in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in April 1986 and of the disaster's aftermath. It takes us through the events that occurred when the number 4 reactor core ruptured in a destructive steam explosion, causing the emission of very high levels of ionizing radiation, with catastrophic health and environmental effect for the immediate vicinity, but also for regions far removed from the power plant. It also takes us with great detail through the disaster's aftermath and how the authorities and all the people involved handled this catastrophic event. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant is located near the city of Pripyat in the north of Ukraine. At the time of the accident, in 1986, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, a federal socialist state that stretched across Northeast Europe and Northwest Asia. The Soviet Union was throughout most of its history a centralized one-party state which professed socialist and Marxist values, but hierarchical policies and a heavy reliance on coercive means in order to achieve the desired result. In other words, while the talk was all about equality, the reality was of a harsh hierarchy that created different levels of access to resources such as jobs, goods, and personal liberties. Moreover, it was an all-encompassing state that left little to be decided and regulated outside of what government dictated. This means that much of the time, the will of ordinary people was stifled by what the powers that be decided. Most importantly, the Soviet Union was in several aspects a failed state, most of all in guaranteeing its people a quality of life in line with that of Western countries. Of course, enforcing a harsh hierarchy and maintaining a state omnipresence in all human affairs, while failing to sufficiently improve quality of life, could not be sustained without strong coercive measures, and particularly without a very proactive secret service. In the Soviet Union, that task fell on the KGB, or the Committee for State Security in English. The KGB mandate was very wide, and it used legal and illegal means in order to serve what it considered state security and state interest. This meant that many forms of citizen conduct, which in a functioning democracy would have been perceived as legitimate or even essential, were perceived by the KGB as acts of subversion and dissent. Moreover, since the KGB was a secretive organization, it was left to the citizens of the Soviet Union to guess where national interest lies and what might be perceived as subversiveness. This last problem is made clear right at the beginning of the miniseries, when the people in charge of handling the unfolding crisis are unsure of what the party line is concerning the disaster. Most of the central characters make the educated guess that the powers that be will want to deny or severely downplay what's happening in Chernobyl. But even when acting according to this hunch, they are uncertain to what degree the denial should be carried out. This puts them in a precarious position, and it is clear that they are all afraid to act before they know what the right play is. Furthermore, the miniseries shows that the characters' fear goes beyond major decisions and public announcements, but extends to private conversations and the regular back and forth that is needed in order to decide on courses of action. That is, they act as if they are constantly being watched. Indeed, in cases of heavy state surveillance, one cannot know in what situations and in what places one is being tracked because much of the surveillance is covert, and because the organizations that carry out such surveillance seldom abide to the letter of the law. Secret security agencies all across the globe, including in democracies, are prone to using the secrecy that shrouds them in order to hide their own transgressions and breaches of state laws. In countries in which the Secret Service plays a dominant part, citizens who come in contact with such agencies pick up on the patterns and thus learn not to rule out the possibility that a certain practice of surveillance won't be used just because it is illegal. On the contrary, they start to assume they are always being tracked, and this, of course, affects their behavior. The means of surveillance depicted in the miniseries are pretty low-tech. While some bugging, wiretapping, and still photographing are involved, most of the time the surveillance measures amount to agents lurking in the area, agents following the character, or seemingly casual encounters with covert agents. In a dramatic sequence, the character of Valery Legasov, the top atom scientist who is commissioned to handle the crisis, encounters two ordinary-looking people in the hotel bar who strike up a conversation with him. These people are later discovered to be KGB operatives, and the innocuous conversations that they had with him turns out to be a test put forth by the powers that be. In other sequences, we see that occasionally the surveillance becomes overt, probably to remind those tracked that they are being watched. Such a situation, in which people have no way of knowing who is an agent operative and who isn't, places them under great strain and produces many problematic behaviors. People censor themselves heavily, thus withholding information that may be useful or practical. People talk in code, which while is definitely a method to counter some of the surveillance, is not very conducive for getting all the possible information and discussing all the possible options. Most importantly, and as surveillance scholars noted long ago, people stop trusting both each other and the organizations that they come in contact with. This idea that surveillance breeds mistrust is portrayed in the Chernobyl miniseries in many ways. For instance, the deep skepticism people have about what they are told makes them non-compliant and even defiant, even when what they are told is for their own good and imperative for their health. All in all, the series shows how hard it is to operate under such heavy state surveillance, both for ordinary people and for high-ranking officials. It makes a point of stressing that such heavy state surveillance has a corrosive effect on any attempt at understanding the truth and being capable of coping with disastrous events, and that it produces a society which is to a large extent driven by fear. We are thus led to conclude that without such heavy state surveillance, both the quality of life of the characters and their ability to handle the catastrophic crisis would have been significantly improved.